Welcome back, peeps, to another episode of the Tooth or Dare podcast. If you're a peep, Irene, hello, how are you? If you're watching this on YouTube, hi, nice to see you. If you're listening to this in the car, hello, I hope you're having a great day. Welcome back to another episode recorded live at Voices of Dentistry. Voices of Dentistry is a really interesting conference where KOLs get to speak. This year I got to speak one of my lectures, which is on YouTube as well, is Can S-word employees make great leaders. There's also a podcast episode. And generally, it's all podcasters and the listeners of podcasts that attend. We get to record on our own little table at like a mini booth, and I got a lot of content. So this is the first of many episodes that will be released from the Voices of Dentistry Conference, and specifically with a really cool person. His name is Perrin DesPortes. He's not a dentist, not a dental professional in any designation, but he's a really smart businessman. And he shares the story of how he and his father were in business together and sold their company to a big manufacturer, and kind of the journey through his struggles and successes being a business person working with dental people. And kind of how he navigated through that and how he's navigated through life. Now opening up his own bigger company called Polaris Healthcare Partners, where he takes individual dental practices and builds them up to 20, 50, hundreds of locations, kind of like how to create your own DSO. So I encourage you to listen to this part one, and there'll be a part two next week as well with Perrin. And if you want to connect with him, description stuff's below. A little bit of a life update for me. Wow, it's been kind of a whirlwind. It's Monday morning. I'm on my way to the office, and this weekend was a really remarkable weekend. I got to attend 2 different conferences, flew out on Thursday to attend the SPEAR Summit in Arizona. And if you don't know what SPEAR is, it's Dr. Frank Spear created this amazing educational facility, plus created content for, I'm not even doing it justice. It's just an elevated level of excellent dental education. How better can I describe it? And I alluded to the fact that I have been invited to speak for them. I have 2 webinars that are coming up, and I want to encourage you to register for them because they're free. My first lecture, which is coming up on July 27th, is called The Surgical Checklist, and it's the dental hygienist's guide to post-operative patient care for patients that have had implants done or surgical interventions done, what we should be looking for, how we should be monitoring, and how we should be preventing implant failures early by methods that we can use in our assessments. So the link of that is going to be below. So I encourage you to register for it. There's one that's coming up in August as well, so I'll keep you updated with the link for that one a little bit closer too. But if you do want to be eager and register for them now, the link is in my Instagram bio, so you can navigate to my Instagram bio and grab the links to register early. And that would be really cool. So thank you for having me at your SPEAR Summit this weekend. It was wonderful. And then I was there for a couple of days. I got to hear some remarkable speakers that just perform exceptional dentistry. And then I flew to Star of the North, which is in Minnesota, and I got to speak yesterday twice. Not yesterday, the day before. What day is it? It's Monday. I was there on Saturday. I did a 3-hour lecture in the morning and a 3-hour lecture in the afternoon, which is probably why my voice is sounding so raspy, Macy Gray. So yeah, that was my weekend yesterday. Lou and I were vegetables on the couch for most of the day after, flying home, 6 a.m., Air Canada, losing my luggage again, finding it and navigating through Toronto traffic. We're celebrating here in Toronto that our Toronto Maple Leafs have made it through the first round of the playoffs, which hasn't happened in 19 years. So the city was basically shut down. It took me 3 hours to get home from the airport, which normally is a 20-minute drive. I digress. So here's the episode with Perrin DesPortes at Voices of Dentistry, and stay tuned for the part 2 and register for my SPEAR webinar. Thank you. Okay. Have a great day. Peace out, peeps. welcome back, peeps, to an episode of the Tooth or Dare podcast, peeps, with your peep, Irene. And I have a guest today. Hello, Perrin.
Hello, Irene.
DesPortes. Is that how you say it in French? I know you
DesPortes.
DesPortes. I am very excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank
and I'm
you.
sure that our listeners are also very excited.
They have no idea what's in store for them,
yeah,
right?
the most exciting financial discussion. You will buckle up, peeps.
Lord.
Buckle up. Before we get into the kind of more detailed financial discussions, I want to get to know you a little bit. I mean, I know you from trade shows and from your partnership with Mark Costas, and I need to know a little bit more about you, your involvement with Polaris. But take me back to where did you grow up?
Yeah,
Where were you born? And
so I grew up in Columbia, South Carolina, and you can kind of say that I was born into the business side of dentistry, as boring as that may sound, but my family owned a dental distribution business headquartered out of Columbia, South Carolina, called Thompson Dental Company.
Okay.
And the company was founded in 1899 by my great-grandfather, James Perrin Thompson. I was fourth generation in that business. My dad was president and CEO, and my grandfather was chairman of the board.
So you were born into a legacy, basically.
I was, and there are not many family businesses that make it through 3 or 4 generations. So kind of an interesting company and an interesting, family business to be a part of. We ended up selling the business in April of 2002 to Patterson, not for really financial or operational reasons, but due to, I'll say, poor equity transition planning reasons. And, when you have a successful family business, it's kind of an illiquid asset. And my father has 2 sisters, neither of whom worked in the business, nor did their husbands, nor did any of their kids.
Okay.
And
which seems to be a trend. I mean, usually there's one, but more now than before. I guess before there was this expectation that you didn't want to disappoint your parents, and I'll do it because dad was a farmer or mom was a dentist or whatever it is. But now that kids are, connected to their phones and society so much more, they're veering away from more family trends.
Yeah, more mobile, literally speaking. And, I think upon my grandfather's ultimate demise, I mean, he was 82 at the time, I think, or maybe 84 at the time. His estate was going to be set up to be share and share alike. So you can kind of do the quick math. If you got 2 family members who own a third, and a third, you can easily outvote the one who's responsible for running the business.
Sure.
And so, that was challenging, and family business isn't all it's cracked up to be. And, I'm grateful for my time with my family. I wish I could have worked with my father for longer. But I also saw some of the ugly underbelly of family business at an early age, and that was a little disconcerting too.
What kind of lessons did you learn in that have led you to where you have taken your businesses today? Like you said, you wish you would have worked with your father for longer. Well, how was that time working with Dad?
It was. I never worked directly I never reported to him. This was. I joined the company in 1995 when I was about 24, and we sold it in April of 2002. I would have been 31 at the time. And my dad was a visionary in the business. He was innovative in a lot of ways. Dental distribution is kind of hard to be innovative with, but we bootstrapped our own practice management software company. It started out as what's known as a Unix system way back before the days of Windows, and then really funded a software development group that I ended up leading the sales arm with, not the code development side. But that was, it's commonplace now if you look around. Heck, there are tons of software-oriented AI type businesses, but back in the mid 90s, or late 80s, early 90s, that was altogether unheard of.
Right.
So, that was an interesting way to get to work with my father, but not work for him, and also be able to kind of blaze my own path that he hadn't done the way he came up through the business. And I think that was something where you can kind of not live in the shadow of your father, but kind of create your own successes that weren't dependent upon him. And I'm a pretty motivated person, and I never really tried to ride any coattails to the best of my ability, at least. So it was a great experience for a short period of time, and was, I always look back on those years fondly. That being said, when Patterson bought the business, I ended up staying on with them for 15 years. I ran 3 different businesses for them, and I got to swing a bigger bat maybe than I would have at the family business.
What did they do with your company? Okay, let's take a step back. So your family is devoted decades of its life. Maybe a century? When did your
Yeah,
great,
it was 101 years
okay,
old,
so
103 years, yeah.
My mental math led me to close to 90 years.
Yeah.
So a century of business development with a lack of sustainable technology because your business was growing as technology was changing. So you got to a point where you couldn't scale it any further without the support of a bigger entity, perhaps. That lead to the sale?
Well, I mean, I would say that the poor equity transition planning is what precipitated the sale, because for a distribution business that is debt financed, for inventory, for payroll,
fluctuating costs.
Yeah, and a large fixed cost structure to it, and low incremental margins.
Right.
Very successful in its own right, but difficult to operate and manage. When you think about having to buy out 2/3 of the ownership to maintain control of it, there's just not enough debt funding to go around. It would have been a crushing burden. I mean, the business, we're not talking about a $100 million value company here. Don't get me wrong, but it's a lot of leverage to take on.
So what did they do with the company once?
So Patterson and the family business was Thompson Dental Company. Basically, we're the same structured company. We had 14 branches, if memory served me correct, from about Baltimore through Orlando, Florida, I think. Yeah. And Patterson, national company, publicly traded, had a presence in the Southeast, but didn't have a strong presence, especially in the Carolinas, where we were. So it was an acquisition that was geographic in nature, and very complementary in terms of lack of territorial overlap. So, you look back on it and you say, wow, there were about 400 employees in Thompson Dental Company at the time, and most all of them that wanted to stay on with Patterson had the opportunity to do that.
That's
now, things like marketing department and the bookkeeping and accounting weren't necessary. That was some headcount attrition. But for the sales, for the operation, the branch operations and sales generating positions, revenue generating positions, almost all of them found a home at Patterson, and I was one of those.
And you were one of them.
Yeah.
And of course they would. I mean that would have been a smart negotiation in that transition process to keep you on in order to help with the operations. And
my father didn't want to move to Minneapolis and didn't want to take on a regional leadership position because he felt like a lot of his leadership team was better equipped to do that. And if he'd been with the family business for a long time. I don't know how many years, probably 30 years or more at that point, more than 30. So he also felt like if he stayed on post-acquisition, that a lot of the employees wouldn't be able to make a break with the past and embrace the new employer. They would constantly want to look back to him for the way things were. And so he transitioned out shortly thereafter.
That's a very humble and clear-minded decision to make, and I applaud him for that. Because there's two sides to being a business owner. There's the mathematical side where you have to understand that decisions are made in and around you and that you may be the problem. So he was able to really analyze that, I guess, to grow a company of that size and that scale. But yeah, that's an interesting thing that he was able to make that decision without any external influence.
Yeah, I think.
Or was there? Was there a little advisor on his shoulder that said, "Hey, let's talk about this. Do you think that you staying on would be for the best?"
I think the leadership at Patterson wanted him to stay on, but I think that was something that he recognized early on that wouldn't be the best thing for the former Thompson employees, and it arguably wouldn't have been the best thing for Patterson either. So, I think,
or
it was,
even for your dad. Like, who knows
Yeah.
what those decisions were that were to be made, and maybe he disagreed with them. Like, maybe,
yeah, it would be
interesting.
it would be tough to go from being the CEO of the business for a couple of decades to taking orders from somebody else and not being able to call the shot, you know. So,
Interesting.
yeah, but I mean, he had a great career, obviously, with
Yeah.
it, and it was a right time for him to exit. And
So you stayed on for 3 years, you said?
I stayed on for 15 years
Wow,
and
okay.
ran 3 different businesses for him.
Oh,
So
okay.
I've moved around a good bit through my decade and a half with Patterson. I ran the Richmond, Virginia sales office for about 4 years. I ran Metro New York, New Jersey for 4 years. And then Charlotte was North Carolina was the last 7 years.
So what does that mean? What is a day in the life, and what was your title, your official title at the time?
General manager or branch manager. Basically, at Patterson, the way they used to have it constituted, the branch manager had full P&L responsibility of that operation.
Break that down for the listeners at home that don't know what that means. So
Yeah.
what does that, if
So
you
it's-
could build an intricate graph of
Yep.
hierarchy, you were here. What does that mean for the people below and above you?
Yeah, so Patterson had about 75 to 80 operating branches at that point in time, and the person who ran the branch it was kind of like, I used to say, it's like being the CEO of your own business with a bigger company behind you. So having full P&L responsibility means that you're responsible for the top line revenue growth, the bottom line profitability, and everything that happens in between it. And in an operating branch for Patterson, you have a sales arm, the people who call on dentists and sell cotton rolls or sell capital equipment
People
technology.
that come to your office and connect with you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Then you have the tech service component, the people the men usually that ride around in vans and fix things when they break.
Yep.
And then you have an internal support infrastructure that's like operations, scheduling, customer service, inbound telephone support, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
All of that was oriented at an operating branch level at Patterson.
Yeah.
So when I say it's like being the CEO of your own business with a bigger company behind you, it really kind of is.
You run that entire location. So
Set
there's one
the-
in Toronto, for example, which is where I went. I outfitted my practice from
Yep.
Patterson. So I went to the Toronto branch, which was near the airport, and I met with my sales rep and also the director of sales there and a couple of people from Sirona. Yeah. So the person and the guy's name that ran that branch at the time, it'll come to me. I can see his face. I just can't remember his name.
Hopefully he's not listening to the podcast.
He hasn't been
right?
with Patterson for a year and a half now.
Okay.
I think he's moved to a different company. But anyway, so that entire building, all of the people, the resources are his responsibility, and he reports to the national or
a regional president. They call it. Yep.
Got it.
mhm,
Okay.
Yep.
So that's a big responsibility. So there were likely, I don't know, a few thousand people
So
working in and around you.
So for us, let me think real quick. I would say the branches that I ran varied in size between the smallest one was about 30 people and the largest one was about 85, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
And, sales volume was probably in the, I don't remember this, like $25 to $40 million range, something like
Okay.
that. And we called on any number of customers that would have numbered about 1,000 on the low end to about 5,000 on the high end, if I
Okay.
remember correctly.
Interesting. So
yeah.
that must have really been quite a formative 15 years
It absolutely was.
for you.
And they really Patterson really back in the day entrusted the branch manager to call the shots. And that was one of the most nerve-wracking things and one of the most liberating things that I loved about the role early on. It changed over time, but they trusted you with a lot, and when I started with them, I was 31. I was the youngest person in the Richmond branch, and I was running the damn thing, and I
Did you know what you were doing, or did you fake it till you
God,
made it?
yeah,
Like, what did that like? They handed you the keys to the
Yes,
castle.
yeah. Said
And
don't
they said,
screw
"Don't
it up.
screw it up.
Yeah,
Don't set it on fire."
Here's your training program. Call 911. So
Yeah.
it was. They did teach you a good bit about business. Some of it you had.
Was there an onboarding process back then,
A
as there
little
are
bit of
now?
one. Not the way there is
It's
now.
like, here's the laptop. The password is Patterson123.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and
capital P.
yeah, exactly. Don't leave the caps lock on.
Yeah.
I would say a lot of it was on-the-job training and learning on the fly, but they really evaluated the people who were taking those roles as to what their judgment was and their ability to make decisions. And a lot of that comes down to how you handle customers and how you can guide and lead your team, and then also the recruiting piece of it, of how you bring high-level talent into the organization. And if you can do those things, you're probably going to be a success. You're not guaranteed by any stretch, but
you're going to be a success.
Yeah.
So how, in that role, did you define success?
That's a good question. I think there are a couple of different. There are two ways, really. At the end of the day, Patterson's a publicly traded company. So,
numbers.
Yeah, we all have numbers to generate, to be accountable for, and to hit. And that's on an annual basis, even though the company reports quarterly earnings. But, you had a budget that you helped set, and you had revenue and profitability goals that you were, charged with meeting. And sometimes you had good years, and sometimes you had lean years. Welcome to the world of big. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think the second way, beyond just the numbers side of it, is the softer side of business. It's in that role. It's leading through people. It's creating a culture. It's driving accountability. It's the things that are the same whether you're running a dental practice or a dental distribution
soft
company.
skills.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
And I think. It's a role that I really did enjoy for a number of years. It changed over those 15 years. The company went through a lot of changes, obviously, as well. And, toward the end of those 15 years, it was a different role, and one that I was in my mid-40s at the time, and just I didn't see myself doing for another 20 years, honestly. And that at that point I was running the Charlotte branch.
So interesting, full circle, you made the decision that your dad made.
Yeah,
to leave the business in a different way, but also with a similar outcome.
Well, I would say if you look at the decision my dad made, half of it is benevolent, if you will. The other half is probably more from a control orientation. And I talked about this in the presentation yesterday of that journey to exit Patterson. And, after having been successful in it, the Charlotte branch won Branch of the Year 4 out of the last 5 years I was there. We were at the top of our game, and, I was pretty good in the role, I think. I had a lot of great people working with me, and we put up a lot of good numbers. But when you think about it, like, okay, I'm mid-40s. If I'm going to work another maybe 20 years or more, like, am I going to do this same job for that long? And I didn't think I had another 20 years in me. So then kind of step back and say, well, I love the company, the role's changing. What else is there? Well, above me is a regional presidency type of a role that covers 10 to 12 branches and 6 to 8 states or something like that.
A lot of travel, a lot more responsibility.
Pack a bag on Monday morning and come home on Friday afternoon. And I was newly married at the time, and our daughter was, 2. And I didn't want to leave my wife and daughter behind for weeks on end. So I didn't want to do that. My wife's an ophthalmologist and was part of a really good practice, a really good group in Charlotte. So we weren't going to move to Minneapolis where the company was headquartered.
Right.
So you sit there and kind of start doing the math, and you're like,
you do a pro and cons list, I guess.
It's a really, really short list because it sounds like more of a you problem, Perrin, than it is a company problem, right?
Yeah.
And that was what ultimately, I don't want to say forced me, but led me to the conclusion that leaving Patterson was going to be the right thing for me. And if I did, I wanted to make sure that my next endeavor, whatever it was, that I was going to kind of be more in control of what my future was or was going to be. And I wanted to be an active participant in making it what I wanted it to be. So.
I think that's important. And, listeners are in all walks of dental life at this point. Perhaps some of them are listening to this podcast and wondering what is this useful information. We talked about this earlier about reading a book the first 90 days, which I'm rereading, and you said, I read that book 25 years ago. And it's interesting because I started it 2 years ago. I put it down a quarter through because it was like irrelevant information to me at the time, and now I'm picking it up again. It's like, I think I saw this in this book at one point. You pick it off the shelf and you're in a different stage in life where that information is much more valuable. So someone listening to this right now, driving to work or home from work, thinking, what do I care about working at Patterson? You never know if perhaps your future may lead you to a different direction, similar to how your dad, similar to you. Thinking of things a little bit more critically in the moment, and it sounds like you do that, and you're a numbers guy. There are two types. We were just sitting on another podcast, and I'm looking across the table at Justin Moody and Papa Huska, and then you on the other side, and it's like there are two types of people in the world, and that table represented it so beautifully. And I'm sitting in the middle, and I'm a little bit of both. And it's interesting that we go through so many different decisions every single day. When we get up, we go to work, we go to the gym, we don't go to the gym. And that might lead you to the person that you're becoming, for good, for bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think there.
But you have to open your mind and your eyes in the moment and say, is this the gig? Is this the job that I want to do for the next 25 years? Is this the family life that I want to have? And we've got those grind years, where you grit and bear it, and you don't take a paycheck, and you work a little bit longer and a little bit harder, and you suffer a little bit more, but you see that end in sight, or you're beginning with that end before you begin. But I think many dental people don't have that vision, where we think what we want is the 9 to 5, but the reality is we want much more.
Yeah, dentistry. This is probably a much broader statement than what I was going to lead in with, but dentistry and a lot of other businesses for sure can lead themselves to be more like Groundhog Day. You can have the same day over and over for 30 years if you allow it. And I think historically, it has sort of been that way because dentistry has been a very evolutionary type of an industry, not a revolutionary type of an industry. And I don't think that we're living in those same times. And so when I talk with younger, new dentists or new people in the profession, or I've got to give a presentation to the Harvard Study Club when I'm in Boston next week, which is the only way I'm ever going to be able.
Just a humble drop, a little rolling of the eyes. I've got to give a study club presentation to the Harvard.
Well, let me assure you, this is the only way I'm ever going to be allowed on that campus, and probably never be invited back. But so
I think you'll be okay.
I think when you're starting out in dentistry or just thinking about your career, there's a great degree of intentionality, and forward thinking that you have to apply now. And if you're new, you should not be, in my opinion at least, chasing a compensation rate. Look, we all like making money. Sure. None of us do what we do for free, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you will have the opportunity over a long period of time to make a lot of money. What you're looking for early on in your career is a mentor, somebody who will take you under their wing, spend time with you, give you guidance, accelerate your learning curve. And I had that early on in my career. I was fortunate because I didn't seek it, and I arguably didn't appreciate it to the fullest when I was in it. But somebody a couple of people took an interest in me and spent time with me to save me from myself. And I look back on that and just think like how fortunate I was, and I didn't appreciate it in the moment. And if there's one bit of advice I can give to younger people, it's that, and I'm 52, so hopefully I'm not that old, but I think understanding how you can gain experience through other people at a more rapid rate is the ability to kind of scale yourself, for lack of a better term. So, there are things like that when you think about going back to the Groundhog Day and what dentistry can be, I think dentists that are, maybe like Justin and Randy's age, that are maybe closer to my age than your age, have had the same career, the same day over their entire career.
Mm-hmm.
Younger people in the profession, be they dentists, hygienists, or anybody else, is not going to be that. It is a series of 5-year sprints.
Yeah.
So we think about, building a practice, building a group, creating success, being innovative, all that. It's not a 30-year endeavor anymore, in my opinion. You should break it down into chunks that are probably around 5-year horizons. And look, I love 10-year plans as much as the next person, and I love, quarterly planning sessions and strategic plans and big, hairy, audacious goals and all that other kind of stuff. But at the same time, the startup world for me, since I left Patterson, has placed an importance on me in terms of being flexible, being opportunistic, and learning how to pivot and move fast. And that ain't easy for somebody who's mid-career, who came out of a corporate setting, and it is not my first nature to do that. Mm-hmm. But I think if you're going to be a nimble business owner, and really be built for the long haul is not one day repeated over 30 years. It's probably like a series of 5 to 6 sprints in the interim, and that business is going to change a lot over time.
Wow. That was really well said, and I feel that very deeply. I graduated in 2007. I have a political science degree before I went into dentistry, which I never thought would be valuable until this very moment in my life in the last 5 years.
Yep.
3.5 years where I'm recollecting things read and learned that are now being used in my day-to-day life when I never thought they would be. And I agree with you. The next few years of my life, of me opening a practice and getting to profitability and scaling, will be very different. We'll be sitting at this table, hopefully, in the same spot in 5 years from now and having a very different conversation. And you're right, the 10-year plan is too spread out because technology and our industry is changing so much, whereas perhaps 20 years ago, 10 years was 10 years. Things were slowly changing, but not as rapidly as they are now. And if you're not moving forward, you're falling behind.
And I think it's not wise to say that I made X number of dollars last year.
Right.
And I'm extremely confident that that's going to continue every year for 10 years unabated.
Right.
Like, that's not the world we live in.
No.
So some of the competitive pressures and the threats, external threats, force changes upon your business that you cannot control. And that's why you have to be innovative, loosely put, from a standpoint of recreating the business proactively and continuously over a period of time to ensure that.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited for part 2 of this episode where we talk about your next step in your next journey, which I believe is Polaris.
Sure.
So stay tuned for part 2 of this episode, and we'll chat with you soon.
Looking forward to it.